Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and first of all, thank you all so much for running from one house to the other. It's one of those things where, of course, it's an enormous privilege for us to have a director to come and do this pre-performance talk before a show is opened. But therefore, we needed to leave the house free for the things to happen that need to happen. But you all know me, I'm Kate Moss, I'm a novelist and I'm the biographer, as it were, of Chichester Festival Theatre. And it's my huge pleasure this evening to be interviewing Jonathan Kent. Jonathan has directed at the National Theatre, at the Donmar, at the Sheffield Crucible, at Glyndebourne. He was the co-artistic director of the Almeida Theatre for 12 years. But most important for us here, in our beloved CFT, the director not only of A Month in the Country and Private Lives, but also of the magnificent and wonderful Sweeney Todd, which, like Private Lives, went from here into London. And it was a wonderful thing to hear all the youth theatre members, when they walked past both Sweeney and Private Lives, see the Chichester Festival Theatre production, and all were tweeting each other going, "That's one of ours up there." Jonathan is back here to direct Gypsy. And I don't know, I can't see you awfully well. Who has seen Gypsy so far? Good. Who is going in tonight? Anybody?
Oh my God.
Very good. And the usual gag, ladies and gents, who hasn't yet bought a ticket? Okay. Nobody ever puts their hand up when I do that, Jonathan.
Right. Well, there aren't many tickets to buy. So
no, well, this is the tremendous thing. One of the things that I always wonder with something that is as iconic as a show like Gypsy, is it one of those that you've always wanted to do? Is it something to do with your working partnership with Imelda? Or is it one of those when Jonathan Church says, "We need you back, Jonathan Kent, what do you fancy?"
No, well, it's really Imelda. When we did Sweeney Todd, Sondheim came and loved Imelda, thought it was one of the best music theatre performances he'd ever seen, which from Sondheim is going it a bit. And he said to her, "You know, you should do Gypsy." And I got caught up in the slipstream. I coattailed hugely and got to direct it. But that's where it started. And it started with Imelda. And you can't do Gypsy unless you know who's playing Mama Rose. It is one of those, it's a sort of music theatre King Lear or something. You can't do it unless you know who's going to play it. And Imelda, in my admittedly biased opinion, I've done 3 shows with her now in the last 2.5 years, is really preeminent in her generation of actors. And actually, there's nobody, I can't think of anybody of any age in this country who could act, sing, and play this, I mean, she dances even, in this to the level that she does. She is a remarkable figure. She's a very, very extraordinary figure. And what is thrilling, and what, again, it's been very lucky for me because I've been, again, caught up in the slipstream, she's an actress who's, I think, coming into her own. Yes, of course, she was brilliant in Vera Drake. She was nominated for an Oscar and things like that. But the body of work she's building up now, I think, is just remarkable. She went from Sweeney Todd, then we did a play at the Hampstead Theatre Club, which transferred to the West End, called Good People, which was a contemporary American play where she was playing a blue-collar Boston unmarried mother. And now Gypsy Rose Lee. And now Gypsy, I mean, and Mama Rose in Gypsy. And there's nobody who can touch her, I don't think. So from that point of view, it's very exciting to work on. But it's only because of that we launched ourselves into it. And it's been quite a long time, because we've been talking about it for a bit. It's been quite a long time in the gestation, which is not a bad thing. I mean, when we did Sweeney Todd, we waited 2 years before we actually did it. This is 2.5, nearly 3 years. Sorry, I'm talking much too much. You asked me a single question and floodgates
This is terrific, obviously. No, this is what we want.
But
there's no blood and stones involved in this.
But the difficulty of doing it here is that the piece is a sort of hymn to the proscenium arch and the pit. It is a sort of, it's a love letter to him. It's to a bygone kind of theatre. Vaudevillian theatre, which we don't we had music hall, we had variety, but vaudeville had its own tacky glamour. And it died in the late 30s and was replaced by burlesque, which again had its own sort of even tackier glamour. But we don't really have it. But we've had to try and recreate a world which could contain that. And one of the things we did, and that's what the joy of, the joy actually I have to say of coming to work at Chichester, because it is a theatre that both Jonathan Church and Alan are so open to things. And also we were lucky enough for there to be the transformation of the theatre, so we got a pit dug, which is great. So at least you have a pit, and we've built our own proscenium. So we've slightly answered the call of the piece. So it's been tricky to do in this space, and you're slightly forcing the theatre to be something it's not. I hope we succeeded in that, but it was a question, and it's been very tricky, I have to say, tricky to do. Because of that, you're sort of wresting the theatre into something that actually, ironically, Tanya Mazejevich wanted to deny.
But it's really exciting, I found, sitting in the audience, having the orchestra in, dare I say it, the right place, actually in the pit. Yeah. I was quite fearful that people were going to fall in, because there was an awful lot of peering going on. But in terms of what you have achieved with creating that sort of strange wrestling between a proscenium arch and our thrust stage here, you always knew it was going to be for here. Yeah. So presumably, when you started to plan with your creative team, that was the first creative challenge, which was how to play this house, but also not be untrue to what was needed, the backstage areas being visible and things. Yeah,
I think in a straight proscenium arch theatre with flying, what you do is just drop things in all the time and move things. What we've done, and the piece is, and it's a remarkably good piece of theatre, never mind it's got some of the greatest songs of the golden age of American musicals. It's also just an extremely well-written and well-crafted piece of drama. And what it is, it's a sort of journey. It was written in '59, and which is 10 years after, say, Death of a Salesman. But it was the golden age of American theatre, where also and the sort of just the tail end of the innocence of America before the '60s and Vietnam and all that. But the pursuit of the American dream was beginning to be tarnished. And what it is, it's this little group, this woman with this little group, this little troupe of children to begin with, who grow up with her two daughters, trailing across America in pursuit of the American dream. Well, in pursuit of success at almost any price. It's like in Grapes of Wrath, the Jodes, moving across America in pursuit of, survival for the Jodes. But in a way, this is sort of survival for Mama Rose and her troupe. In that sense, it needs to be a journey. And so what we've done, instead of dropping cloths in and stuff, we've got trucks which move backwards and forwards. And I hope filmically, so that as one retreats, so another one comes forward. So we have a sense of movement endlessly. I think that's very important, certainly for this space.
And it makes wonderful use of the new stage and all the things that work and the different traps and things. Yeah. But going back to this idea of the beginning of the end of innocence, it's a particular time, written in '59, but about, the late 20s, early 30s.
Well, the height of the Depression.
Depression. Now, with modern eyes, we would see it probably as a story of emotionally abusive family. So how do you balance the need to be true to the '59 text and how people would have seen it, and the comedy of it, without letting it become almost too modern?
Well, I think in a way, that's why I've set it relentlessly slap bang in period. Because I think if you deconstruct it now and do sort of, it calls those things into question. You think, well, somebody report that woman immediately to the child protection scheme. And also, even at the time, it's remarkably close to the true story of Rose. Of those three women, of Gypsy Rose Lee, of June Havoc, and Mama Rose. But even then, she was always one step ahead of the authorities, and she had something like 5 or 6 different birth certificates for her children so that she could demonstrate that they were really 16 when in fact they were 12. And it's true that they didn't even know their real age right until they were in late teens. In fact, Mama Rose gets caught out, and this again is true, because baby June Havoc in real life, eloped with one of the dancers, and she sent the authorities after them. But because she'd lied, and in fact she was 14, I think, June, at that time, but because she'd lied so much to the authorities had her down as 18. So she was above. There was no control of. Mama Rose couldn't control her. So, it's an astonishing story, and in a way she is a ghastly person, but in another way that you can't help but admire her resilience and her resolve. And there's something heroic, just in the way that there is about Mother Courage, for instance, of somebody who just relentlessly drives on in the face of every adversity to achieve a goal. And there's something appalling and valiant about it. And in the end, I hope you have sympathy for her, or empathy, if not sympathy.
With the, you mentioned it, obviously, you started with Imelda and the fact that at the heart of it is this one character and you feel round. What I thought was so extraordinary listening to her is that she is one of those actors who sings with such clarity that it is as if she is simply talking to you in that sort of paced
Well,
way.
that's why Sondheim, who didn't write the music on this, although he had a lot to do with the music, he's the lyricist, but he loves her because he hears his lyrics more clearly than he does with anybody.
How much flexibility as the director do you have with the way that you interpret individual songs in particular?
I think you have I think Imelda's Rose is different from certainly the... I've never seen... that's not true. I saw it in Leicester about 2-3 years ago because it was being done and I knew I was going to do it, so I went up to see it. But I've never seen a big production of it.
Did you see the Angela Lansbury?
No. I didn't see that. And I didn't see any of the ones in America, although when I was in America, there's the Lincoln Center has archive material. So I went and watched them. I watched Tyne Daly... what's her name? Who's just played it? Patti LuPone, thank you. Patti LuPone, who's played it twice, actually. They could not be more different from Imelda.
And what is that? Is that a harshness or a vulnerability?
No, it's just, like all great actors, it's not simply impersonation. Great acting is revelation, and it's through the prism of Imelda Staunton. And even if you had, she said a line almost exactly like, say, Patti LuPone had said it, it will be different because it's her. And it's a difference of sensibility, but also I think her performance is not remotely sentimental. And I'm not saying Patti LuPone's was particularly sentimental, but there is a flinty refusal for any self-regard in this performance, which I think is uniquely Imelda.
Yes, and becomes very deeply shocking towards the end.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing about it. It's not, it's quite a dark piece. It's strangely dark for a musical. I mean, it also has some of the greatest show tunes imaginable, and really some of the best show tunes written for the American Broadway musical. But at the same time, the book there's a dark undertow. And her journey is quite a disturbing one, I think. So you have the juxtaposition of these two, which makes it such an interesting piece. It's a piece which has not been done in London for the last 35 years because Arthur Lawrence, who wrote the book, refused to let it be done. And it's really because Stephen Sondheim went into battle for Imelda and me to do it, that we got permission to do it.
And obviously, at the heart is Imelda playing Rose, but there are two, I think, also astonishing performances around her. Lara Pulver, who, of course, people will know from Vanya here, has again one of those voices of such clarity that she feels like she's whispering in your ear. And Kevin Whately as the love interest who, sadly, in the end can't quite stick the course. But did you then, once you had this underway, did you have particular ideas of the sort of people you felt would work with Imelda, or did you actually go into an open audition process in a more normal way?
I asked both Kevin and Lara. I auditioned Lara, but I sort of pretty much knew that I wanted her, but we'd never worked together nor met. And she was, you know, sometimes it's very off-putting as a director when people sort of mount a campaign to play a part. But actually, if they are talented and they really want to do it, you ought to, as a director, pay attention because they want to do it for a reason. And Lara has had a great always had a great response to this part. And actually, it is the most interesting arc, really, of the whole piece, in that it is about a young girl who is sidelined by her sister or for her sister and is just support, and in fact is sort of desexualized. She's dressed as a boy for the first half of the piece, so as not to detract at all from Baby June, who is this frighteningly blonde soubrette. But in the course of the play, she becomes a stripper, but a certain kind of stripper. But she discovers her own sexuality through what she's doing, through stripping. And it's an interesting, she becomes not just a woman, but a woman who takes her clothes off for men. Although she doesn't, Gypsy Rose Lee didn't really take all her clothes off. So it's an interesting arc, a woman finding herself. The piece is so much about growing up and also about growing old. And that's what's moving about it. Kevin Whately, who is a marvelous actor who has spent an awful lot of time, as you all know, doing television, doing Morse and then Lewis. And it's great that he's come back to do this, and that he sings. And it's a certain kind of love interest. He's the man that Mama Rose should have stuck with, but she drives everybody away in the end. Anybody who stands in the way of her, well, not her career, but it is her career, her children's career. And in the end, she loses the one man who would have stuck by her. And Kevin is an extremely decent and nice man, and I think that comes across on stage.
You do also have a great deal of fun, because there is always that challenge when one of the gags is that the people that we, the audience, are watching are supposed to be hopeless. So you have a lot of fun with the children's troupe at the beginning, and then the less youthful strippers, shall we say, when they first get to that point. So with those sorts of scenes, do you feel that they are a counterbalance to the darkness that's underlying it all? Or are they just simply, you know, a bit of fun?
They're not just a bit of fun, they are sort of like it was. I mean, Mama Rose's troupe, who they weren't dancers, she just found them in, I don't know, in supermarkets or something. If they were available, they were in the troupe. And so they weren't naturally talented. The only talent they had was that they were there. And the thing is, they grew up, but she didn't allow the act to grow up. So they were still doing things rather ludicrously 10 years after they'd long since left childhood. And that breeds its own kind of absurdity. And the strippers, this is a very sort of fourth or fifth grade burlesque house. So these are strippers also who are past their sell-by date, put it like that.
But it is very funny.
Yeah, well, it is a great number. Yes. That is a great number.
It is, those of you who've not yet seen it, I mean, it's, you know, you could hardly hear at some points because the laughter in the audience was so, you know, so joyful.
That is one of the great numbers. It's called You Gotta Get a Gimmick. And they are very good. And I think it makes sense. I cast them older.
But also what I thought was very touching about that particular scene at the moment that Louise is going to be forced to do something, and in the audience, in a way, you're saying, don't do that. But of course, then it's the liberation. But you do manage to capture a sense of genuine female friendship and support. That on the one hand, it looks like a load of shrieking when it first starts, but actually there is a genuine looking out for one another, which I found very touching as well.
And it's not, that's what's sort of a mark of the worth of this piece, is it is a very entertaining number, but it's there as the education of Louise. It's there to instruct. So it has a purpose. It's not just, hey, this is hilarious. It is there for a reason. And as you say, there is a sort of solidarity, and later on one of the strippers comes back and she's become friendly with one of these hopeless showgirls called the Toreadorables, which Mama Rose has, after the boys all leave her, she manages to corral some girls in and calls them the Toreadorables and makes them dye their hair blonde. And but the stripper, there's the and that's one has to be careful of, but there's the camaraderie of people who work in the theatre. There's the collegiate nature of theatre. And that's something that, I hope communicates to an audience, but it's something that people who work in theatre absolutely recognise, that it doesn't matter how different you all are or whatever. Just, I think, in the face of the sheer terror of having to go and do it in front of you all, it binds people together. And, it's extraordinary. I know that from doing lots of different things where I do opera. I've done opera and I do theatre and musicals and straight theatre. That, in fact, I can't think of an occasion where the company hasn't come together. It doesn't mean that people aren't difficult or not difficult or anything. They're just like any group of people. But at the same time, in the face of having to do it, there is a sort of tight camaraderie which sets in, and I think that's reflected very much in this piece.
And at the curtain call, there is a real sense of warmth that comes from the stage into the audience, which you don't always get.
Oh, good.
But there really was, certainly on the night I saw it. Very beautiful, slightly different from everything else. The dance interlude, Dan Burton.
Yeah.
That is a beautiful piece of choreography. Is that part of an original piece of choreography? No. Is that Stephen Mears?
That's entirely Stephen. It was choreographed and directed originally by Jerome Robbins, who was a brilliant choreographer, but he was very clear about his contribution to it. And he, for a long time, and this, for instance, he was the choreographer of West Side Story, and to this day, you can't do West Side Story without using his choreography. But in this, Jonathan Church and we managed to get permission to re-choreograph Dan Burton. It's a sort of Fred Astaire-ish number in the first half, but it is an extended dance piece. And we managed to get permission to do our own choreography on that.
It is so beautiful to watch, but it also, in a very, very quick, really, and subtle way, makes the point that some of these performers actually might genuinely have been incredibly talented, but it wasn't the way that they could make a living. They were hoofing around. And so it makes sense of him and, of course, Baby June.
Leaving.
Yeah.
That's the trouble. Mama Rose wanted to preserve them in the aspect of being 10 years old. And of course, they grew up and they left home and was sort of left home. But they left her high and dry, as they all inevitably did leave, with the exception of her other daughter.
So you've been thinking about this. You have a relationship with Sondheim. He admires the amazing Imelda, and you all have worked together. So you've been thinking about Gypsy for some time. Mm-hmm. Has it been how you expected? Is it the show you thought you were going to direct?
I think so. I think so. It's funny, I can't remember, because you think, oh, I love this, because you want everybody. I mean, the sort of pathetic nature of being a director is that you just want everybody to be, as great as you know they are. So you sort of tend to, I think it is. I think it's an extremely, and I'm not just saying this because I'm directing it, I think it's an extremely good cast. It's a cast, and what I'm proud of for them is it's a cast in depth. Yes, Imelda is phenomenal. Yes, Lara is brilliant. Yes, Kevin is brilliant. But throughout, I've got really wonderful actors doing small parts. And,
like Louise Gold.
Like Louise Gold playing a stripper. But even smaller than that, I got, really good wonderful actors, and actors filled with character. And that's what's so important. There's nothing bland about any of the performers. They are high definition in one way or another. I mean, there's, Jack Chiswick, who is Mr. Goldstone in this, who doesn't have a line. But he's a wonderful flavour to have in the piece. And I've been lucky like that, in that I think everybody, whether it just be the boys in her troupe or the girls, they're all, Natalie Woods, who's one of the girls in the troupe, they're all high definition. So in that sense, it's much better even than I imagined.
Because it's almost operatic in scale in terms of the size of the cast. I mean, it's
yeah, it is. It's funny that it's been very difficult to put on, I have to say. I hope it's okay. But it has been difficult, as I said, because I think we were forcing the theatre to be something it wasn't of nature. So that was tricky, but it is big, but it's not. It's big because it's like a 1,000-piece jigsaw puzzle. You have to everything has to fit in because they're very small. There are 11 scenes in the first act. There are 9 in the second, or more, I think. And it's just lots of little pieces. In the first half, there's a song every 4 minutes. In the second half, there is much more dialogue, and there's only 3 or 4 songs in the second half. But it's so it's been difficult to pull together. But because I've had a extremely good company and
wonderful lighting design, and video design,
all the elements have been great. All the people who are working on it have been remarkable. Mark Henderson, who I've worked with for nearly 20 years now, it's frightening how time's going, who does the lighting, who did some of the greatest lighting I've seen, really, in Sweeney Todd. Anthony Ward, who did Sweeney Todd and Private Lives and has now done this, has done a wonderful job and wonderful costumes as well.
And a sort of annoying question now, flagging it up. But I'm interested because writers feel differently about this, directors feel differently, actors feel differently, and this audience comes to most of these talks and so has heard different answers to this. You're sitting here the day before press night. It's your company. This is an extraordinary achievement. Anyone who's seen it will know that it is really wonderful, and everybody tonight is in for a treat. But that moment when you hear the overture and you see him lift his baton, what do you feel on a press night? And do you read reviews and notices afterwards, or actually is the work the thing and that is what matters?
Well, of course, I'd love to say, I know, all I care about is the work. But that would be a lie. I want everybody to want to see it, and not to like it, to admire it. So, of course, I can't pretend that it doesn't sting when somebody says it's terrible. But I do want, of course I want to be thought genius. But more, as much, I want the value of this company to be recognized. So, of course, if they are criticized or if it is criticized, I feel disappointed. I think disappointed, and I feel defensive on their part. So I can't pretend that and I tend not to read reviews, or what I do, I sort of read them out the corner of my eye.
Yes. I read them on the screen, because somehow it's not as bad being criticised on a screen as it is in the newspaper.
Oh, well, I haven't evolved.
No, I always check mine out and I think, it's not that bad.
No, I see a headline and I sort of, I do that.
Look away.
But I want, yes, I can't think of anything I want more than all this company, my company, all my companies, but particularly this company, to be recognised and admired, because I admire them enormously. And it is a huge achievement on Imelda's part, certainly. It is a vast part. It demands acting of the highest level, and it demands singing of the highest level.
Those big last notes. I mean, it's astonishing, really.
And on that tiny little body, you think it's anatomically impossible that tiny little woman can make that noise.
Did you choose the band?
No, I didn't, but Nick Skilbeck, who was the music director on Sweeney Todd and has re-orchestrated this, I think has done a brilliant job. But also, I think us putting it in the hall by having a pit has changed. I mean, I think it's quite hard to go back to the idea of having them all stuck away and mic'd up front. I think we've ruined it for people coming after us. Not everything is suited, but it's wonderful because the band is so much part of it. It's part of the world of it. It's a big, brassy, sassy American sound.
And it also reminds us that every performance in a theatre is different every night, just a bit, because it's real people doing their thing. Now, on which point, I'm afraid we are slightly quicker than usual, because firstly, you're all in the wrong theatre, ladies and gentlemen, and you have to get across the way and have your glass of whatever before you go in. There are a couple of other performances talks to enhance the performance. On the 30th of October is the post-show for Gypsy. Now, you all know the drill. If you're in that night, you stay in your seats. Any of you who would like to go to that and listen to the cast talking about their experience, you can, but you need to just book a ticket. It's free, but you do need to book a ticket so CFT know how many people are in and if there's any space. Then I'm interviewing Imelda on the 3rd of November. Imelda will come back on afterwards and we'll talk. And I fully predict that, as Jonathan has done, Imelda will spend most of her interview telling us how brilliant Jonathan is. Which will be good. Well, exactly. Well, feed it all back.
I said so.
Well, we've established you are a genius, you see, so that's the thing. And then finally, there is an Inside Out on the 5th of November at 11 in the morning, which the members of the creative teams and the crews talking about actually how you put something so complicated, so brilliant together. Because when you've seen it, you will see Jonathan and the whole cast and creative teams and crew have achieved is not just the most complex piece of theatre with many, many working parts, if you will, and people involved, but something that is at the same time absolutely astonishing to watch. So rather than sitting, oh my Lord, and thinking somebody else is coming on and is it going to go well, it doesn't even cross your mind that it might not. It is so beautifully done. So, ladies and gentlemen, those of you who are going in tonight, you have a great treat. We are incredibly grateful for Jonathan the day before press night. I fully predict a wonderful constellation of stars after tomorrow night. But, ladies and gentlemen, can you please thank Jonathan Kent?